In the gilded hall of the city's most luxurious restaurant, lights twinkled, reflecting off the Christmas decorations. Mary, with watchful eyes and silent steps, served the feast while hiding the ache of sadness in her chest. The aroma of truffled turkey mingled with the music that wrapped around the laughter of the elite, until suddenly the voice of the millionaire, Richard, ripped through the festive air. "Christmas is only for those who matter, not for those who serve." Everyone froze, staring at Mary and the enigmatic bag dangling from her slender hand. The silence that fell was heavier than the night's chill. A mix of shock and embarrassment rippled through the table, but Mary, holding her head high, clutched her amulet. She knew that on this Christmas, something extraordinary was going to happen. The lights flickered like conspiring stars, while the scent of the food was no longer enough to mask the injustice. No one knew who she was or what she carried. But until that moment, not even she realized the power her faith would have that night. As the guests whispered, and some turned their faces away, Mary felt there was more compassion in the eyes of the few than in all the fortunes spread across the tables. Her story blended with those of so many women who, on this eve, cling to hope. And it was only the beginning. What no one knew was that this was the Christmas when everything would change for her and for everyone there. The suspense grew with every scornful laugh. The bag looked so ordinary, yet it carried secrets of justice and redemption. Mary thought of her children and the silent promise she had made to God. "Do not let me lack the courage to live a miracle." It was as if the clock was racing against the impossible, marking time not just until Christmas, but until the revelation that would make that hall never be the same again. The hook was set. What would be the true meaning of that night? Breath hung in the air, but no one imagined the miracle that was about to happen at that feast. The scent of cinnamon, the lights, and the sparkle in Mary's eyes were omens of change. In the background, someone prayed in silence, and in Mary's heart, a certainty was born. Miracles are possible for those who believe. Days before that feast, Mary would wake early in her small apartment, lovingly preparing coffee for her children. Their simple tree, decorated with recycled boughs, shone with a dim light of hope. She remembered Christmases with her husband, the prayers in front of the window, and the tight hugs at the foot of the bed. Now, a widow, she had decided that faith would be her children's greatest gift, even in the struggling days. "God doesn't leave us alone, especially at Christmas," she would whisper, filling the simple home with promise. While Richard organized his lavish feast, complaining about the cost of imported flowers, Mary fought for an extra shift at the restaurant. The contrast was cruel, but Mary preferred humility to the coldness of luxury without affection. She knew hunger, yet she gave hot meals to her neighbors in need, never forgetting the importance of giving. Her tired face carried the rare beauty of someone who holds on to hope even when surrounded by contempt, and she was guided by a faith that did not depend on material blessings. At night, Mary and her children would gather to pray, asking for a Christmas where no one felt alone. Their modest supper was made of laughter, memories, and the certainty that everything is transformed when there is love. The hook of tomorrow was always there. Could a miracle really happen this time? Mary believed, even without guarantees, and that hope was her greatest treasure. The night before the rich feast, a small gesture would change her destiny. Mary promised in prayer never to bow her head to humiliation, because she knew only God could judge hearts. Her greatest request? That Christmas would bring dignity to all who love and serve, including herself. The faith within her was the flame that never went out, and soon everyone would see her light. The chapter ends with Mary adjusting her uniform and looking up at the dark, star-speckled sky. Silently, she gives thanks for another day, feeling deep in her soul that this Christmas would be unforgettable. The loop continues. What secret does she carry in the bag? What connects her story to that place? And above all, how far can faith take someone who has never lost hope? The eve of the feast arrived, heavy with tension and expectation at the luxurious restaurant. Mary felt the weight of the stairs as she arranged the tables with millionaire decorations that contrasted with her simplicity. The guests' laughter echoed like distant music when Richard began his cynical speech about Christmas generosity. "You all know how I hate this season of phoniness," he mocked, not noticing Mary's wounded expression. But she, firm in her faith, whispered a silent prayer. "Lord, transform this heart of stone." The cruelest moment came when Richard, noticing Mary's presence near the main table, raised his voice for everyone to hear. "Look at that! Even the waitress wants to be part of our important people's Christmas," he said with cutting sarcasm. Awkward laughter filled the hall as Mary felt her cheeks burn with public humiliation. Some guests lowered their eyes, others laughed out of social convention, but Mary remained standing. It was as if an invisible force held her up, reminding her of her husband's words. "Miracles happen for those who believe, my love." As she served champagne with hands that trembled slightly, Mary overheard cruel comments about people who don't know their place. The contempt was palpable, but something inside her was growing. It wasn't anger. It was determination, guided by faith. Every offensive word turned into fuel for the certainty that God had a plan. The bag hanging from her arm seemed to pulse with a life of its own, guarding secrets that would soon transform that night. Why didn't she fight back? Why did she smile subtly, even in the face of cruelty? The final straw came when Richard offered a measly tip, saying, "Here, buy something decent for your children for Christmas." Mary looked at the money, then into the millionaire's cold eyes, and did something that surprised everyone. She refused. "My dignity is not for sale, sir," she said with a serenity that left the hall in momentary silence. It was the first time anyone had dared to confront Richard Montgomery in public. The hook was planted. What gave Mary such courage? The answer was closer than anyone imagined. The chapter closes with Mary retreating to the kitchen, where she briefly kneels and says a prayer of gratitude for the strength she received. Only God knew what she felt in that instant. The loop intensifies. Mary smiles for the first time that night, gently touching the mysterious bag. The kitchen staff watch her with growing admiration. She had faced the most powerful man in the city without flinching. But what truly motivated such courage? Christmas Eve held surprises that no one could imagine. The weight of public humiliation should have broken Mary, but something extraordinary was happening in her heart. As she organized plates in the kitchen, silent tears streamed down her face, not of defeat, but of an inexplicable emotion. She thought of her children at home, waiting for her, and the promise she had made never to return empty-handed of hope. A small Christmas song played on the kitchen radio, and Mary closed her eyes, feeling she was not alone. "Sometimes, Lord, the real miracle arrives when we least expect it," she murmured softly. The crisis came when Richard, drunk on power and the compliments of his guests, decided to deal the final blow to Mary's dignity. He called her back to the hall and in front of everyone declared, "This woman has no place at our sacred Christmas feast." The words echoed like a sentence, and Mary felt it was the moment for the ultimate choice: flee the humiliation or trust the strength growing inside her. The guests watched in awkward silence as she walked slowly toward the exit. But then something changed. Mary stopped, turned, and looked directly into Richard's eyes. Outside the restaurant, under the starry Christmas Eve sky, Mary held the bag against her chest and said the most intense prayer of her life. The city's colorful lights shone like a giant nativity scene, and she felt an unexplainable peace wash over her. "Our Father, who art in heaven," she began, and every word seemed to carry transformative power. It wasn't just a prayer, it was a total surrender of her destiny into divine hands. The night's chill couldn't touch the warmth rising in her chest, a certainty that something profound was about to happen. The turning point came when Mary heard a Christmas carol playing from the nearby church. Silent Night echoed softly down the empty street. It was as if an inner voice whispered, "It is time, my child." She looked at the illuminated restaurant, saw the guests' silhouettes through the windows, and knew she could not leave that place without fulfilling her mission. The bag in her hands pulsed with purpose. It was no coincidence she was there, on that night, at that exact moment. God had orchestrated every detail, and Mary finally understood her role in that Christmas. With steady steps and a racing heart, Mary returned to the restaurant, surprising the doorman who had seen her leave, crying just minutes before. Now her eyes shone with a determination that wasn't there before. It was faith transformed into action. Sometimes the real miracle arrives when we least expect it, she thought, pushing open the glass door. The guests saw her enter, and a heavy silence fell over the room. What would make that humiliated woman return? Mary held the bag with both hands, her gentle smile contrasting with the tension of the moment. The loop was closing. The time had come for the revelation that would forever change that Christmas feast. Mary crossed the hall with a serenity that seemed otherworldly, her steps echoing in the absolute silence that had fallen over the feast. Richard, visibly irritated by her audacity, shot up from his chair and pointed a finger at her. "I told you to leave. Who do you think you are?" But Mary didn't look away, and her voice came out steady, carrying an authority no one expected from a simple waitress. "Mr. Montgomery, there is something you need to know before this Christmas ends," she said, placing the bag on the main table. The guests glanced at each other, torn between curiosity and discomfort. What was this humble woman hiding in there? With hands that no longer trembled, Mary slowly opened the bag, as if revealing a long-hidden treasure. From inside, she pulled not plates or utensils, but carefully organized papers, which she began to spread across the white tablecloth.
Richard tried to grab the documents, but Mary was faster, her voice echoing through the decorated hall. "My name is Mary Smith, and before I was a waitress, I was an auditor for the IRS for 15 years. Shock washed over their faces. The revelation was impossible, inconceivable, but the official documents on the table did not lie. The Christmas lights seemed to pulse brighter, as if witnessing a sacred moment of truth. Tears began to stream down Mary's face as she continued, her voice choked with emotion but firm in her mission. "I lost my husband 6 months ago in an accident, and I needed this job to support my children," she explained, touching each document as if it were a sacred relic. "But God put me here for a greater reason, so I could see with my own eyes what you have been doing." Richard turned pale as Mary revealed the false invoices, the suspicious transfers, the embezzled donations he had promised to the orphanage. The silence was sepulchral even. The background Christmas music seemed to have stopped to witness this moment of divine justice. Richard staggered, trying to deny it, but his voice came out weak and without conviction in the face of the exposed truth. You were spying on me," he managed to stammer, but Mary shook her head with genuine sadness. "I was praying for your heart, sir," she replied with a gentleness that contrasted with the gravity of the situation. "Every day I watched you waste so much while children go hungry at Christmas, I prayed that God would touch your soul." It was then that the impossible happened. Richard, the man who mocked faith and despised the humble, fell to his knees and began to weep like a child. The tears were of shame, of regret, of a heart finally broken by the truth. The most touching moment came when Mary, instead of triumphing over the millionaire's fall, knelt beside him and took his hand. "Forgiveness is possible even for those who stray on the darkest Christmas," she whispered, and those words echoed like a church bell in the hearts of everyone present. The guests, once silent accomplices to the cruelty, were now weeping openly, touched by the grace of that moment. Richard looked at Mary through his tears and saw not judgment, but compassion, the very compassion he had mocked just minutes before. In that instant, the Christmas feast would never be the same, and everyone knew they were witnessing not just justice, but a true miracle of transformation by the Christmas spirit. Richard's transformation began right there on the cold restaurant floor, where he confessed every wrongdoing between deep sobs. "I became a monster," he admitted, looking at the documents that proved his greed and dishonesty with Christmas donations. Mary remained by his side, her presence more powerful than 1,000 sermons. She was the personification of grace in action. The guests, once admirers of Richard's material success, now saw the true cost of a life without compassion. One by one they rose, some to leave in shame, others to draw closer to that sacred moment of redemption. Mary, with the wisdom of someone who knows both pain and perseverance, then made an invitation no one expected. "Mr. Montgomery, my home is humble and my supper is simple, but there is a place for you at our table this Christmas," she said, extending her hand to help him up. The silence was broken by a collective gasp. Was it possible that this humiliated woman was offering forgiveness and welcome to her oppressor? Richard looked at her outstretched hand, as if seeing a lifeline in the middle of the ocean, and he gripped it tightly. "I don't deserve this," he whispered, but Mary smiled with a tenderness that lit up the entire hall. Christmas isn't about deserving, it's about receiving and giving love. The luxurious feast was abandoned that night not for lack of food, but for lack of meaning in the face of what had just happened. Richard, still trembling, asked the manager to distribute all the food to the area's homeless. Several guests offered to help, touched by the spirit of transformation that was overtaking everyone. Mary coordinated the operation with the efficiency of someone who had always known how to serve with love, but now she was no longer invisible. She was recognized as the hero of that Christmas. The tables laden with delicacies were emptied to feed those who were truly hungry, and the restaurant became the setting for a collective miracle. When Mary and Richard arrived at the small apartment where the children were waiting, the simplicity of the decorations contrasted sharply with the luxury they had left behind. Luke and Laura ran to hug their mother, wary of the elegant man accompanying them. "Children, this is Mr. Montgomery, and he'll be having dinner with us tonight," Mary introduced him gently. Richard, looking at that tree made of hope and at those curious little faces, felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, the feeling of belonging to a family. The table was small, the food was simple, but the love circulating there was more abundant than any banquet. During the humble supper, Richard discovered the true meaning of Christmas as he shared bread and stories with Mary and her children. He told them about his poor childhood, about how he had gotten lost in the pursuit of success, and about the emptiness that no amount of money could fill. Mary listened intently while the children, with the innocent wisdom of youth, offered drawings they had made as gifts for the visitor. Can a cold heart be reborn through the Christmas spirit? The answer was right there at that small table, in those sincere hugs, in those tears of joy. But the true miracle only became clear when Christmas arrived, and everyone there knew they were living that very miracle. The following Christmas brought a transformation no one could have predicted that unforgettable night 1 year prior. Mary, now promoted to manager of the Grand Palace restaurant, was lovingly organizing a special feast, but this time it wasn't for the elite. It was for the community's families in need. Richard was by her side, no longer as the arrogant millionaire, but as a humble man who had discovered life's true treasure. He had fulfilled every promise. He returned all the embezzled donations, paid his debts to the IRS, and transformed his company into an example of transparency and generosity. The two worked together every Saturday at the orphanage he had nearly stolen from, and their unlikely partnership had blossomed into a genuine friendship. The children from St. Clair's orphanage ran through the decorated hall, their giggles echoing where once there was only cynicism and coldness. Luke and Laura helped distribute presents, proud of their mother who never lost faith even in the hardest times. Richard watched it all with tears in his eyes, remembering the empty man he was a year ago. Today, he had purpose, he had love, he had peace. Mary approached him and touched his shoulder gently. "See how God transforms everything when we let him lead?" He just nodded, too emotional to speak, but his smile said everything about the journey of redemption he had traveled. The impact of that night a year ago had spread like ripples on a calm lake. 15 of the business leaders present at that fateful feast had changed their lives, inspired by Mary's courage and Richard's transformation. Together, they created the Christmas Hope Fund, which guaranteed a feast, gifts, and dignity for over 800 families every year. Chef Anthony, who had always been kind to Mary, opened a culinary school for underprivileged youth, offering not just skills, but hope for a better future. The story of the courageous waitress spread through the city, becoming an example of how faith can move mountains and transform even the hardest of hearts. As the party unfolded, Mary gathered everyone for a prayer of gratitude before the feast. "Lord, thank you for showing us that the true Christmas isn't found on lavish tables, but in hearts full of love," she began, her voice thick with emotion. Richard held the hands of Luke and Laura, now his godchildren, and added, "Thank you for not giving up on me when I was just a man lost in greed." There wasn't a dry eye in the hall. Everyone felt the living presence of something greater, something sacred, something only the genuine Christmas spirit can bring. The lesson was clear. A person's true worth isn't in what they own, but in the love they are capable of giving. Christmas became eternal in those hearts because everyone learned that miracles happen for those who believe, even for the most unlikely. Mary never forgot her husband's words, "Miracles happen for those who believe," and she had proven it with her courage to confront injustice without losing compassion. Richard, who once mocked faith, was now its greatest living testament that no heart is so cold it cannot be warmed by true love. And as the Christmas lights twinkled and the children sang carols, everyone knew this was just the beginning of many miracles to come, because when faith and courage unite, the impossible becomes possible. What was your greatest Christmas miracle? Tell us in the comments and keep the chain of hope alive, because every Christmas can be eternal when lived with true love.